Hi, I'm Dr. Sonia Greenwich, and these are my 5 tips for managing anxiety.
Every one of us experiences anxiety. Having to give presentations or to speak in certain situations, that can be a big trigger. But for some people, anxiety is really overwhelming. It can stop you from doing certain things, going to certain places, behaving in the way that you want to behave. Some people will find that because of their anxiety, their mind always feels like it's full of questions and worries and worst case scenarios. Anxiety can be so debilitating that some will choose to just stay in their house, away from the outside world and all of the anxieties that it brings. If any of this sounds familiar to you and your experiences, then hopefully you'll find my 5 tips for managing anxiety helpful. Tip 1. Know what is worrying you. Be specific. It has been said that worry is not an emotion, but a behaviour that leads to an emotion. So you worry, which is the behaviour, and therefore you feel anxious, the emotion. So in order to manage your anxiety, you need to manage the worry that's making you feel anxious. But do you ever feel that you don't know what exactly is making you feel anxious, or that everything is making you feel anxious? This is where being specific comes in. If you know what you're worrying about, then you can manage the anxiety that comes from it. So firstly, you want to think generally and then narrow things down. So ask yourself the question, what do I have to worry about? And write it all down. Then it's time to get specific. So ask yourself, okay, what is it that at the current time, on the current date, I'm worrying about? And then write this down. And then you'll have a list of worries that are clearly defined and you can start dealing with them one by one. Tip 2. Know which type of worry it is. Once you have a clear idea of what you're worrying about, you can then sort things out. Well, sort of. It does depend what type of worry you are dealing with, and there are 2 types of worry. There are solvable worries and hypothetical worries. Solvable worries are, as the name suggests, things that you can solve, things that you can actually do something about. So say, for example, that you realise you don't have enough money to pay for that bill that's due. You could solve this by asking a friend if you can borrow some money, or speaking to the people that you owe money to and seeing if there's another financial plan that could be arranged to make things easier for you. The hypothetical are things that you can't actually do anything about, probably because nothing has happened yet. These types of worries can be recognised if you can put the words "what if" in front of what you're worrying about. Oh no, what if my partner leaves me? Oh gosh, what if I forgot to lock the door today and I get burgled? It's important to realise that you can't do anything about nothing, so the best way to deal with hypothetical worries is to let them go. Now I know that sounds easier said than done, but don't worry, my next tip will show you a way to do that. So my tip 3 is to let the hypothetical go. For this, you need to think of your attention as being a spotlight. Wherever you shine that light, that's what you're going to focus on. Imagine you're watching a play and there are 3 characters on the stage. The spotlight shines on one guy who's giving a monologue and the other 2 characters at the back of the stage. Who do you think your attention's going to be on? Well, it's going to be on the guy with the spotlight. That's what it's used for. It's the same with your thoughts. So when you notice that your attention is focused on a hypothetical worry, you need to try to shift your attention elsewhere. So focus your attention on other thoughts, like your upcoming holiday or what you've got to buy from the shops that evening. The hypothetical worries are still there. You're not suppressing them. That will only make them come back even harder. What you're doing is acknowledging that they're there, but not engaging with them. Another technique for acknowledging thoughts but not engaging with them is to imagine that you see them and then they float away. You can see how this is done on the Floating Thoughts video on my YouTube channel. Tip 4. Increase your coping perception. Welcome to Anxiety 101. I'm now going to give you the anxiety equation. If you take a lowered perception of your ability to cope and you add that to a heightened perception of danger, then you end up with heightened anxiety. For example, if you think, I have to go to this party, I won't know anyone, so I'll drink loads, and then I might fall over and embarrass myself, and they'll all be laughing at me and it'll be terrible. I won't be able to cope. So your ability to cope has decreased, and the danger of being laughed at has increased, and that is going to affect your anxiety around the situation. To help increase your perception of coping, you can think about that very worst case scenario and then think about how you deal with it. So you do fall over. What would you do? Well, I could lie there and laugh and say, oh, I'm so clumsy, someone help me up. And then it doesn't feel so bad, right? By increasing your perception of your ability to cope and lowering the sense of danger, you should find that that lowers your anxiety too. So think about something that's worrying you now. Try to increase your perception of how you'd cope, and then see how you feel. Any less anxious? Hopefully. My final tip, tip 5 for managing anxiety, is one that people normally don't really want to do, but I promise you it's really helpful. So tip 5 for managing anxiety is to take whatever's making you feel anxious and face it head on. A lot of our anxiety is experienced because we're using the unhelpful thinking style of predictive thinking. This is where you think you know what's going to happen. So you think that you know that when you go to this party, you're going to get so drunk, you're going to fall over, and everyone's going to laugh at you. So then you don't go. But this is where you need to become a bit of a scientist. Realise that your worries are just predictions about the situation. So write down your predictions and then design an experiment to test things out, to see what really happens. It may be that you do get drunk and fall over and get laughed at, but maybe you don't. Whether your predictions come true or not, you would have learnt some factual information about the situation at hand. So that will help you then plan for the future. If things went terribly wrong, what could you do to deal with that? And actually, if things were great, well, then maybe you can put yourself in that situation a little bit more and not let your anxiety get in the way.